Your deep dive. We're tackling something today that I think we all struggle with no matter what level we're at. We're talking about common errors ESL learners make, and we've got some incredible insights from a chat between two experienced language instructors to guide us.
Yeah, it's kind of like peeking behind the curtain, you know? We get to see what really trips people up out there in the real world, not just what the textbooks tell us.
Exactly. It's like having a backstage pass to the world of language learning. So where do we even start with this? Our experts pointed out verb tenses, especially mixing up the present perfect and past simple as a major hurdle. You know that feeling when you understand the grammar, at least in theory, but then you get into a real conversation and your brain just goes, nope, too complicated.
Oh, absolutely. It's like all that careful practice just flies out the window.
Right. It's fascinating, though, because learners often do grasp the rules. They just struggle to apply them naturally, in the heat of the moment.
It's like trying to remember how to parallel park when you're already running late for that really important meeting. The pressure's on, and suddenly all those perfect practice sessions just poof, gone.
Exactly. And your brain just defaults to the easiest option, even if it's not grammatically correct. Don't even get me started on irregular verbs. Like our experts mention how often learners use good instead of went. It's like English just throws these curveballs your way just when you think you're getting the hang of it.
It's true. But you know what? Instead of trying to memorize endless lists of irregular verbs, they suggested focusing on something else. Pattern recognition.
Pattern recognition.
Yeah, you know how sometimes you just kind of intuitively get a pattern without even realizing it? We want to do that with grammar, too.
So instead of memorizing lists, it's about understanding the underlying patterns. I like that. How do they suggest we go about doing that?
They love this technique called spaced repetition. Now, I know it sounds kind of intimidating, but it's really not. It's just about revisiting those tricky verbs strategically over time.
Ah, so you're not just cramming them in all at once and hoping for the best.
Exactly. It's about fighting that forgetting curve. You know how you can just feel a new word slipping away after a few days if you don't use it. Spaced repetition brings it back just when you need it.
It's like you're refreshing those neural pathways, reminding your brain, hey, remember this.
Exactly. It's about building those strong connections, that muscle memory, but for grammar, you need that consistent practice to really make it stick.
It's like any skill, right?
Yeah.
Practice makes, well, maybe not perfect, but definitely progress. And speaking of making things stick, our experts were really passionate about ditching abstract memorization and embracing real-life context.
Yes. Because, let's face it, knowing how to use a hammer is great and all, but it's way more exciting when you're actually building something, right?
100%. You need that real-world application to make it meaningful.
Exactly. And to really solidify those skills, take, for instance, those pesky phrasal verbs, give up, put off. They're everywhere in English, and they can be incredibly confusing because their meaning isn't always literal.
It's like trying to decipher a secret code sometimes, especially if you're trying to translate them directly from your native language.
And speaking of translations, that was another point they brought up, how relying too heavily on direct translations can really trip learners up.
Yeah, it's like trying to fit square blocks into round holes. It doesn't quite work, does it?
Not quite. You end up with something that's, well, not quite right.
Definitely not ideal. So instead of translating word for word, it's about training your brain to start thinking in English. But that's easier said than done, right?
Absolutely. It's a process. And part of that process is bridging that gap between classroom learning and actual real-life fluency.
It's like you can practice your swimming strokes in the pool all day long, but until you actually dive into the ocean, you're not really experiencing the full force of the currents, the waves.
Exactly. But it's natural to feel intimidated.
It can feel like that moment right before you hit publish on your first blog post or share something really personal on social media. You're excited, but also a little terrified, right?
Absolutely. You're putting yourself out there.
Exactly. So how did our experts recommend getting over that hurdle, that fear of actually using the language in real life?
They're all about finding those low-pressure practice opportunities, places where you can experiment and make mistakes without feeling judged.
So it's about giving yourself permission to mess up, to be a beginner.
Exactly. And the beauty is there are so many ways to do that these days. Language cafes, online conversation groups, language exchange apps.
Oh, tell me more about those.
Yeah.
What do they recommend?
They specifically mention HelloTalk and italki as being really user-friendly and effective. It's like having a conversation buddy right there in your pocket.
That's a great way to think about it. Someone who gets it, who understands the ups and downs of learning a new language.
Exactly. And they were also big fans of immersing yourself in English media, surrounding yourself with the sounds of the language.
Because it's one thing to learn grammar rules, but then you encounter like idioms or slang or just the natural rhythm of conversation, and it can feel like a whole different ball game.
Right. Which is why they love podcasts, especially ones aimed at English learners. They specifically shouted out English with Lucy and the English we speak.
Oh, those are great ones. I've listened to those. They're great for picking up those everyday phrases and nuances that textbooks often miss.
Exactly. They're like a cheat sheet for sounding more natural, more like a native speaker.
And don't forget about the power of movies, TV shows, even TED Talks. It's about finding things you enjoy, things that hold your attention, and just letting your ears get used to the natural flow of the language.
Exactly. And speaking of sounds, we can't forget about pronunciation, which is often a big, I don't know, a source of anxiety for English learners.
Oh, pronunciation, the ever-elusive beast of English learning. It's true. The way we write words in English very often has absolutely zero connection to how we actually say them out loud.
It's true, and honestly, it can be frustrating, especially because there aren't always hard and fast rules.
Right. It's not exactly a phonetic language.
Right, which is why they love this technique called shadowing.
Shadowing. What's that? Tell me more.
So it's all about mimicking native speakers, like really tuning in to their rhythm and intonation.
So it's not just about getting the individual sounds right, it's about capturing that musicality of the language.
Exactly. It's about internalizing those subtle nuances that make you sound more natural, more fluent.
I love that. It's like you're finding the music in the language. Did they have any tips for tackling those words that just seem impossible to pronounce?
Oh, absolutely. They're huge fans of this website called Forvo. It's basically like a pronunciation dictionary on
I
steroids.
never heard of that.
You can type in any word, literally any word, and you can hear how native speakers pronounce it. And not just one native speaker, but often like dozens from different regions and accents.
Oh, wow, that's incredible. So you can really get a feel for the different ways a word can be pronounced. Did they have any suggestions for visual learners? How can we actually see how these sounds are formed?
Absolutely. They're big proponents of using visual aids, like videos that demonstrate mouth movements.
It's like having a pronunciation coach right there on your screen.
Exactly. You can see how those tricky sounds are made, which can be incredibly helpful.
It's like learning a magic trick. You need to see how it's done to be able to replicate it yourself. Speaking of things that can feel like magic tricks, our experts also got into the weeds of prepositions and word order, which, let's face it, often trip learners up because the rules can be so different from their native languages.
Right. And prepositions. Those tiny little words on, at, in, for, they can completely change the meaning of a sentence. And then word order can be its own puzzle.
It's like you have all the ingredients for a delicious cake, but if you put them together in the wrong order, you're not going to end up with something very appetizing.
Definitely not. And that's why they love this technique called sentence diagramming. You might remember it from school, maybe not so fondly, but it's actually incredibly useful for visualizing sentence structure.
Ah, so you're not just memorizing a set of rules, you're actually seeing how the different parts of a sentence fit together,
Exactly. You're breaking it down, analyzing it, and understanding the logic behind it.
which makes it much easier to remember and apply in your own writing and speaking.
Exactly. It's about building that deeper understanding.
And what about collocations? Those specific word pairings that just sound right together in English, like make a decision or take a break.
Yeah, this can be tricky. And they can really make or break your fluency because they're so common in natural speech.
It's true. You might understand the individual words, but when they're put together in a certain way, it's like, wait, what does that even mean?
Right. Which is why they recommend focusing on those common combinations, really training your brain to start thinking in those natural English word groups.
So it's like learning the steps to a dance routine. You master those basic combinations first, and then you can build from there.
Precisely. And as you become more fluent, you'll naturally start to pick up on those more complex collocations.
It's like leveling up in a language learning game. You gain experience, unlock new skills.
Exactly. But it all starts with building that solid foundation. And that leads us to another crucial point our experts wanted to emphasize.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's not enough to just passively absorb information. You have to actively use the language. You have to produce.
So it's not just about understanding grammar rules or recognizing vocabulary words. It's about putting those skills into practice, using them in real-world situations.
Precisely. And they're huge proponents of writing. Even just short bursts of writing can be incredibly powerful.
It's like taking all those thoughts swirling around in your head and giving them a space to stretch out on the page.
Exactly. And it forces you to slow down, to really think about grammar and word choice in a way that you might not if you're just speaking.
It's like you're actively engaging with the language, flexing those mental muscles. Did they have any tips for making writing a regular habit? Because it can be tough to motivate yourself sometimes.
They're all about using technology to your advantage. They recommend tools like Grammarly for that real-time feedback. It's like having a helpful editor looking over your shoulder, but without the judgment.
Right. It takes the pressure off. What if you want feedback from actual humans, though?
For that, they love platforms like Laying 8. You can post your writing, and native speakers will actually correct it for you.
Wow. It's like having a built-in language partner. That's amazing. Now, we talked about finding those low-pressure environments for speaking practice. But what about those times when, even in a friendly conversation, you just freeze up? You know the words, but you just can't seem to get them out.
Oh, I think we've all been there at some point.
Definitely. It can be so frustrating. So how do you get unstuck?
Well, their advice was to be kind to yourself. It happens. Remember that every mistake is actually an opportunity to learn and grow.
So it's about shifting your perspective, seeing those mistakes not as failures, but as stepping stones.
Exactly. And they also suggested focusing on those small, everyday interactions with English.
So instead of overwhelming yourself with, like, trying to have this perfect fluent conversation, it's about finding those little wins throughout your day.
Yes. Whether it's reading a news article, listening to your favorite English podcast, like this one, of course,
Of course.
or even just changing your phone's language settings, those small things add up over time.
It's about creating that immersive environment, weaving English into the fabric of your day-to-day life.
Exactly. The more you surround yourself with the language, the more natural it will become. Think of it like training your ear for a new musical instrument. The more you listen and practice, the more attuned you become to the nuances of the music.
That's such a great analogy. It's about developing that ear for the language, those subtle rhythms and patterns. This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. We've covered so much ground, from those nitty-gritty grammar rules to, finding your voice and expressing yourself confidently in another language.
It's a journey, but it's so rewarding.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up here, what's the key takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with today? What can they do starting today to really level up their English?
I think it boils down to this. Mastering English, or any language really, is a process. It's not a race. And it's about embracing that journey, celebrating the small victories along the way, and remembering that every step you take, every mistake you learn from, brings you closer to your goals.
I love that. So be patient with yourself, find what works for you, and enjoy the ride.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to connect with others. Find that community of language learners who get it, who can support you and celebrate your wins with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because we're all in this together, right?
We are.
Well, on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought to ponder. What's one small but meaningful step you can take today to make English a more active part of your life? Until next time, happy learning. All right, ready for a deep dive today?
Always. What are we diving into?
We're going deep into the world of language learning,
Okay.
but with a twist.
I like twists.
We're looking at how culture shapes how we speak and understand English.
Ah, the unspoken rules.
Exactly. Like sometimes you just don't get a joke in another language.
Oh, totally.
It's like you need a cultural decoder ring.
It's true. We often take for granted those unspoken rules as native speakers.
Right, but imagine that feeling, but with everything, not just humor.
Yeah, it goes way beyond a chuckle or two.
Like what? Give me an example.
Think about politeness.
Okay.
Or being direct.
Oh, interesting.
What flies in one culture might totally flop in another.
So how do you teach that? I mean, can you even teach that?
You can. That's what's so fascinating.
So it's not just about memorizing vocabulary lists.
No way.
It's about understanding the cultural context, those unspoken rules.
Exactly. And those thought patterns, how culture shapes the way we see the world.
Could you give me an example?
Think about how some cultures value being really direct.
Like just saying what you mean, no beating around the bush.
Exactly. But then you have British English, known for being more, indirect.
That's true. Lots of would you mind terribly and all that.
Imagine someone from a more direct culture hearing that.
They'd be like, just tell me what you want.
Right. They might wonder why all the fuss.
I can see how that caused some serious miscommunication.
That's exactly what we're talking about, those lost in translation moments.
So how do we bridge that gap? Like, practically speaking.
Both of the experts we're looking at today talk about teaching English with cultural sensitivity.
So what, like sensitivity training, but for language?
Kind of. But it's more about empowering learners, helping them feel confident.
Give me the inside scoop. What are their strategies?
One technique is comparing cultures directly.
Instead of just saying, this is how you do it in English?
Exactly. It helps students understand the why.
Like showing them the bigger picture.
Exactly.
Role-playing is huge.
Like acting out scenarios.
Exactly. Ordering food, asking for directions.
And navigating all those unspoken rules at the same time.
Right. It builds confidence.
That makes sense.
It lets them practice in a safe environment.
What about idioms? Those always trip me up.
Those are tough. One expert uses storytelling.
So instead of just defining spill the beans, they tell a story. Maybe about a surprise party ruined.
I love that. It makes it stick.
Exactly. Speaking of sticking, humor can be powerful, but tricky.
Yeah, humor is so subjective.
Totally.
What's hilarious in one culture?
Might fall flat in another.
Exactly.
One expert uses clips from Friends and The Office.
Wait, really?
Yeah, to illustrate how humor works in English.
Like Chandler's sarcasm.
Exactly. It helps them decode those cues.
Wow, I never thought of it that way.
It's about cracking the code.
But humor is so personal.
True, that's why the other expert flips the script.
How so?
She has her students share jokes from their own cultures.
Oh, that's cool.
It lightens the mood.
It encourages sharing.
Exactly. It shows that everyone has something to contribute.
I love that.
It's about building bridges, not walls, you know? And that leads us to another key strategy. Celebrating diversity.
Okay, tell me more about that. So celebrating diversity in the classroom, what does that look like in action?
It's about going beyond just, a statement on the wall.
Right, more than just saying we appreciate all cultures.
Exactly. It's about fostering a space where everyone feels seen and heard.
I like that.
Dr. Clark talked about using more diverse learning materials.
Okay, like what?
Think articles,
Okay.
documentaries,
Yeah.
even bringing in guest speakers from different backgrounds.
So it's about showing the richness of the English-speaking world.
Exactly, not just presenting one standard version.
I like that a lot.
Mr. Parker takes it a step further, though.
How so?
He loves project-based learning, but with a twist.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
He encourages students to use their own cultural backgrounds as inspiration.
So not just writing another essay about, say, American history.
Right. It could be researching how their own cultures view a similar topic.
So instead of the American Revolution, they might look at revolutions in their own history.
Exactly. Or it could be something totally different.
Like what?
Maybe they create presentations about their home countries
Oh.
or write stories that blend their culture with their English skills.
Wow, that's really powerful.
It is. It turns language learning into this active process.
They're not just learning English, they're using it to share their own story.
And connect with others. There's this quote I love. Language is the roadmap of a culture.
Ooh, I like that. It shows where they come from and where they're going.
Exactly. Language isn't just words, it's a whole way of seeing the world.
So by understanding the culture behind the language, we understand the people better.
You got it. It's like unlocking a secret level of communication.
It's not just about avoiding mistakes, it's about connecting on a deeper level.
Exactly. And that's what makes language learning so amazing.
It's about more than just memorizing words.
Way more.
It's about expanding your worldview, challenging your assumptions,
It's about connecting with others in a meaningful way.
and celebrating all those differences that make us unique.
Right. Which actually reminds me, we haven't talked about nonverbal communication.
Oh, you mean like body language?
Yeah, all that unspoken stuff.
Which can be just as confusing, if not more so.
Absolutely. Remember how we talked about things getting lost in translation?
Right, like what's polite in one culture?
Could be totally off base in another.
Ex-
Well, that's true for nonverbal cues, too.
Give me an example.
Sure. In many Western cultures, making eye contact shows respect.
Okay, I'd assume so.
But in some Asian cultures, it can be seen as confrontational,
Oh, wow, really? I had no idea.
especially with someone older or in a position of authority.
So you could totally misinterpret things based on cultural differences.
Exactly. And that's why being culturally aware is so important.
Okay, I'm realizing I've got a lot to learn. What else should I know?
Oh, there are so many interesting examples.
Like what?
Well, in some cultures, it's rude to point with your index finger.
No way. You're,
It's true. And the way you gesture "come here" can be interpreted differently.
I'm going to need a crash course in international gestures.
It's fascinating stuff. It just goes to show you how much context matters.
It's like learning a whole other language without even realizing it.
Exactly. And it all comes back to teaching English with cultural awareness.
So it's not enough to just know the rules of grammar and vocabulary.
It's about giving students the tools to really navigate those complexities.
To communicate effectively in a globalized world.
Exactly.
So as we start to wrap up this deep dive, what's the one big takeaway you hope listeners walk away with? So as we start to wrap up this deep dive, what's the one big takeaway you hope listeners walk away with?
I think the biggest takeaway here is that language learning, it's not just about like those grammar rules, right?
Right.
It's about understanding different cultures, how those cultures shape the way we communicate.
Yeah, it's like when you travel to a new place
Yeah.
and you see the world differently. You're not just seeing the sights, you're trying to understand the stories behind them.
And language learning can give you that same feeling, like you said, without even getting on a plane.
Exactly.
And it helps us bridge those cultural gaps and realize that even though we speak different languages, we really do have a lot in common.
It's about celebrating those differences, finding that common ground.
Yeah, and recognizing that even when we make mistakes, those can be opportunities to learn and grow closer.
It's about being open to new perspectives and experiences.
Beautifully said. And I think, for me, that's a really powerful thought to end on. So, to everyone listening, the next time you talk to someone who speaks English as a second language, or someone from a different culture, remember, communication is a two-way street. Be patient, be curious, be open to learning from each other.
It's about making those connections, broadening our horizons, one conversation at a time.
Absolutely.
So, to our listeners, we leave you with this. Think about your next cross-cultural conversation. How can you turn it into a chance to really share and connect? Through language, through culture, through understanding. Keep those conversations going, keep your minds open, and until next time, happy exploring.
Ready for a deep dive. Today, we're going way beyond just flashcards and exploring something truly fascinating: the connection between language learning and identity, especially for students who are learning English from immigrant backgrounds. We're in for some serious aha moments as we unpack how language can impact a student's sense of belonging and how educators can make learning a truly empowering experience. Our guides on this journey: Ms. Sarah Lee, a multilingual education consultant, and Dr. Ahmed Malik, a sociolinguist. And let me tell you, that conversation is full of insights you won't want to miss. One of the biggest things that jumped out at me was this idea that for these students, language isn't just a tool. It's like deeply personally connected to who they are. In fact, Dr. Malik says, and I quote, "Language isn't just a tool for communication, it's tied to who we are." And that just resonated so much with me. Think about it, language shapes how we joke, how we connect with family, how we experience our traditions. It runs deep.
What's fascinating is that when students enter a new culture, learning English can almost feel like they're trying to become someone else. And that brings its own set of challenges.
Totally. It's like navigating a whole new world, and language is just one layer of it all. Ms. Lee mentioned that many of her second-generation students feel this constant push and pull, trying to fit in with their peers while honoring their family's language and heritage. Not easy.
Exactly. And you can see how that could lead some students to feel like they have to choose between cultures, like they had to leave a part of themselves behind to fully embrace learning English.
Makes you realize how important it is to create a space where those unique backgrounds are actually seen as strengths, right? And speaking of strengths, both Mrs. Lee and Dr. Malik are huge proponents of recognizing bilingualism as a major asset, not a hurdle to overcome. For instance, Mrs. Lee talked about actually bringing a student's native language into the classroom. Like, she'll have students translate cultural sayings or write stories in both English and their native language, which is so cool.
Now, that's what I call turning a perceived weakness into a superpower.
Mm-hmm.
Not only are students actively engaging with English, but they're building those bridges between languages and cultures, and that benefits everyone.
Absolutely. And it gets even better because this whole idea of embracing a student's full identity actually ties into a specific teaching approach called identity-based pedagogy. And that really piqued my interest.
Yes. Identity-based pedagogy. It might sound a bit formal, but at its core, it's about creating a learning environment where students feel safe, seen, and celebrated for who they are and where they come from.
It just clicks.
Yeah,
Instead of this like one-size-fits-all approach to learning, you're saying, hey, you belong here. Your experiences matter.
precisely. And imagine the message that sends to students, especially those who might be struggling to fit in or feel like they belong. It tells them, your story matters. You have a place here.
It's like we're shifting away from that old melting pot idea where everyone's expected to just assimilate into one big same culture. And instead, we're talking about a tapestry, right?
Yeah.
Where each thread, each language, each cultural background adds to the richness.
What a beautiful analogy, and a powerful one. And this is where that idea of bilingualism as a strength really comes into play. Did you know studies show that students who are fluent in more than one language often develop better cognitive flexibility?
You mean they're better at adapting to different situations,
Yeah.
thinking outside the box?
Exactly. They also often excel in things like problem solving and creative thinking.
Which makes total sense. And let's not forget the cultural understanding they gain from navigating those different languages and perspectives. That's a valuable skill in today's world.
Absolutely. But going back to identity-based pedagogy, Ms. Lee mentioned some really concrete examples of what this looks like in a classroom. One that really stuck with me was incorporating identity reflections into the curriculum.
Oh, yes. Tell me more about those. I was so interested in how that works in practice.
Well, it can look a few different ways, but essentially you're giving students the time and space to really reflect on their own experiences with language, culture, and belonging.
So it's not just about memorizing grammar rules. You're connecting language learning to their personal stories.
Exactly. Like Ms. Lee said, she often has students write about their experiences with speaking multiple languages, the challenges they faced, or even just the pride they feel in their heritage.
Wow. I can only imagine how powerful that must be for students, especially those who are still figuring out where they belong in a new cultural context.
It can be transformative.
Yeah.
And the best part is, identity-based pedagogy isn't limited to just language learning,
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. Those principles, creating inclusive environments, valuing different perspectives, recognizing how learning and identity connect, that applies to everything, right? It does. It's like a whole new way of thinking about education where everyone feels seen and heard for who they are.
Absolutely. It's about making sure people feel like they belong, not just in a classroom, but in society. When people feel comfortable embracing all parts of who they are, that's when the real learning happens.
This has been eye-opening. And I can already see how these ideas apply to so many areas of life, from how we connect with coworkers to how we tackle new challenges.
Exactly. And it raises a really important question. How can we as a society create more spaces where everyone feels safe to be themselves? How can we make sure everyone feels empowered to be who they are, no matter their background or language?
Now, that is a question worth pondering, and one I hope our listeners will keep exploring even after this deep dive. If you take away just one thing today, let it be this. Language is about so much more than just words. It's about connection, self-expression, and yeah, even identity. And when we celebrate all those different languages and cultures, the possibilities are endless. Thanks for joining us on this journey today. But remember, this is just the beginning. Keep asking questions, keep those conversations going, and let's celebrate the power of language and identity.
Hey everyone, welcome back. You know how much we love diving deep into practical tips for boosting your English, right?
Absolutely, and this one's a gold mine.
You guys sent us this episode with an ESL instructor and a linguistics professor, and wow, they had so much to share.
It was fascinating. They both agreed on this really simple point that fluency, like it's not some kind of magic.
That's about habits, right?
Exactly. Consistent, practical habits. And they both started with this tip that honestly, so many people overlook.
Okay, hit us with habit number one.
Speak out loud every single day.
I can already hear people thinking, wait, am I supposed to, narrate my life to the walls?
That's actually not a bad idea. Seriously, one of the experts even called it narrating your day. It's like you're giving a play-by-play, but in English. It's shifting from just reading or listening to actually producing the language.
So instead of just silently making your coffee,
Right. You'd be saying, okay, gotta grab the coffee, gotta pour it in.
time for the toast.
Yes.
Yeah.
It might feel weird at first, but the more you do it, the more you start actually thinking in English, which is huge. Oh, and the ESL instructor had this fun tip. She calls it the mirror technique.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Mirror technique.
Is this like talking to yourself in the mirror?
It is, and I know it sounds silly, but it really helps build confidence because you're kind of doing a mini presentation to yourself.
Plus, you can actually see yourself, right? Like
Right.
catch any weird facial expressions or anything.
That's the idea, and it makes you so much more aware of your pronunciation too.
So it's all about getting comfortable with the sound of your own voice speaking English. Exactly. The more comfortable you get doing it alone, the easier it'll be to do it with other people.
Which brings us to habit number 2. This one's almost like you're becoming a spy. It's called shadowing.
Ah, yes, shadowing. This technique is pure gold. It's all about finding native English speakers, on podcasts, TV shows,
Audiobooks even.
anything you enjoy listening to. And you try to mimic them as closely as you can.
Like you're their vocal doppelganger, mimicking their pronunciation, their rhythm, their intonation.
And it's not just about individual words, it's about how everything flows together naturally.
The instructor compared it to learning a song. Like you don't just learn the notes one by one, right?
Exactly. You learn how they all connect to create the melody.
And the more you practice shadowing, the more natural your English will sound. You pick up on those subtle nuances that you might not even notice otherwise.
And it's not about sounding exactly like someone else. It's about incorporating those elements into your own voice. It's like adding a little spice to your own style.
Okay, get ready for habit number 3, because this one is all about thinking bigger, ditching single words and going for phrases.
So true. A lot of traditional vocab learning focuses on single words, but then...
It's like you're lost when you actually try to use them in a sentence.
Yes. It's like having all the ingredients for a cake, but no recipe.
You've got the flour, the sugar, the eggs, but you don't know how to put them together.
And you definitely won't end up with a delicious cake. Instead of just, thanks. Imagine learning phrases like, thanks so much, or thanks for helping me out.
Right. You're not just learning words, you're learning how to actually sound natural when you speak.
Exactly. And you're picking up on those collocations, those words that just naturally go together.
Like take a break, make a decision, have a good time. Those are perfect examples.
It's like you're absorbing these linguistic shortcuts that native speakers use without even thinking about it.
And speaking of shortcuts, let's move on to habit number 4. This one might feel a little awkward at first, but it is so incredibly valuable.
Recording yourself, right?
You got it.
Yeah.
It's like having a personal language coach in your pocket.
Both experts were big fans of this because you can hear yourself objectively.
Yeah, you might not even realize you're stumbling over a certain word or your sentences sound kind of choppy.
It brings it all to light. You become so much more aware of your own speaking patterns.
And the instructor had this really cool tip. She recommended comparing those recordings to the native speakers you're shadowing.
Oh, that's smart. So you can hear the differences side by side.
Exactly. It's like having a roadmap to better pronunciation and rhythm and intonation. And over time, you'll be amazed by how much you improve.
It's true. Like anything else, the more you practice, the more natural it becomes.
But, as helpful as it is to practice on your own, at some point you got to actually, talk to humans. Which brings us to habit number 5, level up with language partners.
Yes. Yeah. This is where the real magic happens, right?
It is, because you can have all the vocabulary, all the grammar rules.
But actually using them in real time, when you have to think on your feet?
That's the real test. It's like the difference between studying a map and actually exploring a new city. You can memorize streets and landmarks.
But until you're actually out there navigating.
Right. Encountering unexpected detours, making those split-second decisions.
Exactly. And language partners, they provide that real-world experience. Plus, you get that immediate feedback.
And finding them is easier than ever.
Oh, absolutely. Both of the experts mentioned online platforms like HelloTalk, Tandem, italki.
Yeah, those are great resources.
Whether you want more casual conversations or something structured, even language lessons.
There's something for everyone, and that's where you really make that shift from, passive learning to active speaking.
You're not just absorbing information anymore. You're putting it into practice, connecting with other people.
Which is what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
And, something both experts emphasized was that building fluency, it's a journey.
It really is. It's not a race.
It's about celebrating those small victories along the way. And those small victories, they add up to big progress over time.
Exactly. It's about consistency and celebrating the journey.
Speaking of celebrating, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. But before we do, we want to leave you with a little something to think about.
A little food for thought as you continue on your English-speaking journey.
Here's the question.
Yep.
What one small step from today's episode will you commit to incorporating into your daily routine starting today?
Will it be narrating your breakfast? Giving the mirror technique a try? Maybe even seeking out a language partner?
And honestly, even just 5 minutes a day, that's huge.
It makes a world of difference. The more we were digging into all this, the more I kept thinking that This is so encouraging for people.
Because it really demystifies fluency,
Oh,
right?
it does. It shows you that it's not about, like, were you born with the language gene or
But
something?
it's not some magical skill.
It's literally about building the habits, showing up consistently, and putting in the work.
It's like they say, practice doesn't make perfect.
It makes progress.
Exactly. And those little bits of progress, they give you the confidence to keep going.
They really do. So if there's one thing to take away from all of this is find that one habit that speaks to you.
The one that you're like, okay, I can actually do this.
Yes. Start there and make it your own.
Maybe you'll become a breakfast narrator extraordinaire or a shadowing master, whatever clicks for you.
That's the beauty of it. You get to choose your own adventure.
And we are so here for it. Keep us posted on your progress. And until next time, happy practicing.
Happy practicing.
Ever wish you could just like fast forward your progress in English? Skip the whole awkward language exchange phase and just sound good.
Right.
Well, today we're diving into something that might just be the answer, solo language practice. And I gotta say, it's way more fun than it sounds. We're riffing on a recent episode of The Language Lab, Dr. Emily Clark's podcast.
Oh, yeah, I know that one.
She had this linguistics professor, John Parker, on the show, and they were talking about some really cool techniques for independent practice.
Yeah, what struck me about that episode is, so many people think language learning's got to be this whole big thing with a partner or whatever, but they made a really strong case for, like, just doing it yourself.
Totally. And it's not just random stuff, right? These techniques are built on like actual linguistic principles. So it's not just talk to yourself in the mirror. It's do this specific thing because it'll actually help your brain learn.
Yeah, like that first exercise they talked about, describing your day out loud. It sounds kind of basic, but
It's surprisingly effective, right?
totally, because you're not even really trying to learn grammar rules or anything, but just by talking about your day, you're internalizing all these common phrases and structures.
Exactly. It's like, okay, got to grab my coffee, then answer this email.
There you go. You're already thinking in English. And that's exactly what Dr. Clark was saying, is like turning your everyday life into this low-pressure language immersion environment.
Oh, I love that. Low pressure is key. Right. But if narrating your day feels like a little too everyday, they also talked about talking about your passions,
Ooh, yeah.
which I think is brilliant.
Absolutely. Because then you're tapping into something you're already excited about.
Exactly. Like, are you a baking fanatic?
Yeah.
Explain your latest cake creation in English, every single detail.
Yes. And Dr. Clark actually suggests recording yourself while you do this. That way you can go back, listen, and be like, okay, I'm stumbling a bit here.
Oh, that's so smart.
It's like having your own personal language coach, but way less intimidating.
So much less intimidating. Okay, and speaking of handy language hacks, they also mentioned shadowing, which, have you ever tried that one?
Oh, yeah, I love shattering.
It's like you're basically trying to become a vocal clone of someone else.
Yeah. So you're listening to a native speaker, maybe on a podcast or something.
Or like your favorite show.
Exactly. And you try to match their rhythm and intonation as closely as possible, like in real time.
It's challenging.
It is. But it's so good for developing that like natural flow that a lot of learners struggle with. You start picking up on those tiny pauses, the way words are stressed.
The music of the language.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what else helps you really get a feel for the rhythm of English?
What's up?
Reading aloud. I feel like everyone forgets about this one.
Oh, it's so underrated.
It's like, we all know reading is good for you, but reading out UTLD, it's like next level.
It's true. And in this episode, they talk about how it's like a workout for your pronunciation. You see a word on the page, you might think you can say it, but then you try it out loud.
And it's like, whoa, that's not how I thought that sounded.
Exactly. So you're training your mouth to actually make those sounds, not just recognize them.
Yeah, it's like the difference between like reading about a workout and actually doing it.
Right. 100%.
And speaking of working it out, remember that exercise they mentioned? Practicing speeches in front of the mirror.
Yeah, I was a little, about that one at first.
I know, it sounds a little cheesy, right?
It does, but then I was thinking, like, athletes visualize themselves winning, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it's kind of the same thing. Like, you're practicing your delivery, building your confidence, even if it's just you in the room.
Totally. And it's less about memorizing a whole speech, more about just getting comfortable hearing yourself speak English.
Right. And that's where recording yourself comes in handy, too.
Oh, yes. The Voice Memo app is your friend.
It really is. It's like having your own little language lab, but way less expensive.
And way less judgment, let's be real.
Oh, yeah. No lab coats required. But seriously, recording yourself lets you listen back and be like, okay, why do I always hesitate there? Or, oh, I need to work on that sound.
It's like that instant replay, you know? You can analyze your performance and get better.
Exactly. And it's amazing what you start to notice. Like, even just your energy level can make a big difference.
It's true. Like, if you sound bored, your listener is going to be bored, even if they understand every word.
100%. And you know what else is great for absorbing that natural way of speaking?
What's that?
Movies and TV.
Oh, yeah. They talked about that.
Yeah. They were saying don't just passively watch. Like, really pay attention to how native speakers talk, the cadence, the expressions.
And it doesn't have to be, like, super serious stuff either, right? It could be your favorite sitcom or whatever.
Exactly.
Like you're learning without even realizing it because you're so engrossed in the story.
It's true. But they did mention one technique that's a little more,
Intense.
yeah, a little more internal.
Oh, you mean thinking in English?
Yes, that's the one.
I'll admit, when I first heard that, I was like, wait, what? How do you even do that?
Right. It sounds kind of out there, right? Like, am I supposed to narrate my entire life in my head or something?
Uh-huh. Well, it doesn't have to be that intense. But they gave some really good tips in the episode. Like, start small. Instead of thinking, okay, time for lunch, think it in English, time for lunch. Like, little things like that.
Oh, I see. So it's not about, like, never thinking in your native language again. It's more about just, like, sprinkling in some English here and there.
Exactly. Like you're at the grocery store.
Yeah.
Don't just grab the milk, think milk need milk. You know?
Right, right. I can see how that would start to make a difference over time.
Totally. And they even said it can help you dream in English, which I don't know about you, but
Whoa.
that's a whole other level of fluency. Okay, so we've covered a lot today, just in terms of what you can do on your own to improve your English, describing your day, talking about your passions, that whole shadowing thing, reading aloud, practicing in front of the mirror, recording yourself, watching movies and TV, and then this whole Think in English challenge.
I know, right? It's a lot to process. But the good news is they made it clear that you don't have to do everything at once. Like, pick one or two things that resonate with you and start there.
Exactly. It's all about finding what works for you.
Right.
And honestly, isn't it kind of freeing knowing that you don't need a fancy language partner or a tutor to make progress?
It totally is. It's like, oh, I can just do this on my own time, at my own pace, and have fun with it.
Just exactly. No pressure. So as you're going about your day-to-day, see if you can sprinkle in a little bit of that solo English practice. Describe your lunch to yourself. Narrate that email you're writing. Maybe even try thinking in English next time you're, I don't know, folding laundry. It might feel a little weird at first, but who knows? You might just surprise yourself with how quickly you start to level up. That's it for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.
Ever feel like just picking up a textbook to learn English
Yeah.
isn't quite cutting it?
Right. Like those exercises, they're good for the basics, I guess,
Yeah.
but you got to actually use it.
Yeah. And it's hard to find someone to practice with
Exactly.
all the time.
Yeah.
So that's what's really interesting about this deep dive.
Okay.
We're looking at AI,
Okay.
specifically ChatGPT,
Right.
as a way to help you actually practice English conversation.
Oh, I like this. Yeah.
Okay.
Because you can use it anytime. And it's like having a conversation partner right there.
Yeah. And it's
Good for 7.
it's more than just like replacing a textbook or
Yeah.
flashcards or
Right,
something.
right. Because it's not just about the rules.
Right.
It's about using them in a
Right.
real way.
Yeah. And that's what the linguistics professor and the ESL instructor
Right.
in the source material were saying is
Yeah.
it's all about making practice more natural and engaging.
Yeah.
And so they recommend...
Which is what you want, right?
Right, yeah.
You want it to be fun.
Yeah.
Like if it's a chore, you're not going to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they say start with the basics.
Okay.
Like just have a casual conversation with ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
Like introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Talk about what you're interested in.
Okay.
Just like you would with a person.
Right. So it's almost like tricking your brain into thinking that you're actually
Yeah.
talking to someone,
Exactly.
which is how we learn naturally, right?
Right.
Like we start with simple exchanges when we're kids.
When you're a kid, you
Yeah.
don't start off writing a dissertation.
Exactly. Yeah. You start with like, Mama, Dada,
Right.
fall cookie.
Yeah. And then you work your way up.
Yeah.
And so this ChatGPT,
And it learns as you go, right?
yeah, that's the cool part,
Yeah.
is that it learns as you're talking to it.
Yeah.
It starts to understand like, oh, this is
What you know.
what you don't know,
Yeah.
what you're good at, what you're not.
This is so cool.
And it adapts to you.
Wow. That's amazing. So it's
Yeah.
like having a personalized tutor
Yeah.
in a way.
It's like having a conversation partner who is also
Oh, that's amazing.
like gently coaching you
Wow.
along the way.
I like that.
And then they take it even a step further.
Okay.
I'm like, okay, You've had your little chit-chat.
Right.
Now let's actually practice some specific scenarios.
Oh,
Like-
like real life stuff.
Like, yeah, do you have a job interview coming up? You can practice with ChatGPT.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
Nervous about ordering food in English? ChatGPT will be your waiter.
Okay.
And you can, like, try to order.
Oh, that's fun. That takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
Because you're not actually talking to a real person who's
don't-
going to be like,
Judging you.
impatient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I love this example from the source material.
Okay.
They said, pretend you're at, like, a busy market
Uh-huh.
and you're trying to haggle with the vendor
Oh.
over the price of souvenirs.
So you're practicing your bargaining skills.
Yes.
I love it.
In English.
That's great. I like that.
And ChatGPT can be the vendor,
Yeah.
so you can go back and forth
That's really fun. Yeah.
and practice.
I like it.
And it's all about, like,
And you can keep doing it over and over again until you get it right.
until you're like, I can haggle.
Yes.
I can get this price down.
Exactly.
And you build your confidence that way.
Yeah, because then you go into a real situation.
Right.
You're like, I got this.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not even just about responding
Right.
to ChatGPT.
Yeah.
The experts say flip the script.
Oh.
You can ask ChatGPT questions.
Okay.
If there's a grammar rule you don't understand, ask it.
Like your own personal grammar book?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
If you're not sure how to pronounce a word,
Yeah.
ask it.
Because sometimes those pronunciation things can be really tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have your own personal, like, AI
Mhm.
tutor right there.
It's like having a dictionary and a grammar book all in one.
All in
one.
that can
talk.
talk to you.
That's amazing. This is blowing my mind. This is really cool.
And it makes me think about, like,
Yeah.
the bigger picture of education, you know?
Yeah.
Like this idea of, like,
Like it's really empowering.
it is empowering, yeah.
Cool. Like who?
Like you were in the driver's seat of your own learning.
You get to decide what you want to learn.
Yeah.
How you want to learn it.
And
When you want to learn it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And it's not just about, like, functional language either.
Yeah. Because you're thinking of
All sorts of different things.
the source material talks about using it
Right.
for storytelling.
Oh, interesting.
So picture yourself like
Okay.
recounting a childhood memory or describing a dream you had,
Uh-huh.
but you're doing it all in English.
That's a really good idea.
And ChatGPT is your audience,
Yeah. And it can even give you feedback.
and it can give you feedback.
Be like, oh, I liked that part. Or
Yeah.
maybe you could describe this a little bit more.
Exactly. And so you can
So
start
that-
to think about like,
So it helps you become a better storyteller
Yeah.
overall.
and a better English speaker and writer.
Yeah. Like that a lot.
Yeah. So it's really interesting.
It's really cool.
And then they get into even more.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is good stuff.
Yeah.
Really creative ways to use it.
Okay.
And it's not just about, like, you talking at ChatGPT.
Right.
It can actually help you become a better listener in English.
Oh, that's interesting because that's important too. Right.
It's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, like, think about it.
Yeah.
In any conversation,
Right.
being a good listener is
Mhm.
just as important as
But
being a
half
good
the-
speaker.
It's half of it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
how do they say to use ChatGPT to do that?
They say you can assign it roles,
Okay.
like when you're having a conversation with it. So like instead of just saying,
Yeah.
hey, what's the weather like today? Or whatever,
Right.
you could pretend that it's,
Okay.
I don't know, a potential employer
Ooh. Yeah.
or someone you meet while you're traveling,
Okay.
like a local. And then you practice having a conversation, but you really have to pay attention
Okay,
to
cool.
what it's saying.
to what it's saying back.
Yeah. And ask follow-up questions.
Oh, so you're not just, like,
Yeah,
going through the motion.
exactly.
Okay.
Like you actually have to be present.
And engaged
Yeah.
and listening to what it's saying.
Yeah, and like going beyond just like those one word or like yes or no answers.
Right. Right.
Like really show that you're thinking about
Yeah.
what it's saying.
To like this,
Yeah.
to give this example, let's say you're practicing ordering food
Okay.
and ChatGPT's your waiter.
Uh-huh.
Instead of just being like, I'll take the pasta,
Right.
you can say something like,
Okay.
what did you recommend for a vegetarian dish?
Ooh, that's good.
Or, can you tell me more about the chef's special?
I like that.
Right. So you're like
Yeah.
actually having a conversation.
Yeah.
You know, just like, boo,
Exactly.
here's my order.
And that's a skill that can apply to
Underline.
any language.
In any situation.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets really cool.
Okay.
Okay, you ready for this?
Yeah.
ChatGPT can help you
Okay.
with different English accents.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, so
I can understand.
it can
I'm not
understand,
gonna-
it can speak in different accents.
That's so cool.
So you could say like,
Why?
hey, I want to practice talking to someone with a British accent.
Oh, that's a good idea. And it'll, because there's so many. Right.
Right.
Like even with
Like Australian, South African.
American, Canadian,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
It's like having a world of English speakers
wow, that's amazing.
right there.
Yeah.
Like I'm picturing that scene in the movie Hitch
Oh, yeah.
where Will Smith is
Yeah.
like coaching Kevin James on like how to speak more confidently.
Yeah.
But it's Chat GPT coaching you on how to speak
Oh, that's a good analogy.
with different
It's
accents.
like that.
And it's not even just about
Right.
like mimicking it perfectly.
Because that can be tough, right?
Yeah.
Somebody.
Like I'm not going to be able to suddenly sound
Yeah.
like I'm from London.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's
Go
more
ahead.
about just like,
It's about training your ear
yeah.
to understand
Right.
the nuances
Because think about it.
Yeah.
You're going to encounter
all the time.
so many people in your
But
life
I mean, nowadays,
who don't
they'll-
speak English as their first language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Right.
even for people who do,
Right.
they might have
They might have
They have-
really strong accent.
a really strong accent.
That's hard to understand.
Yeah, and if you can train your ear
Yeah.
to understand those different accents.
That's so helpful.
That's huge.
I like that.
Yeah, and so ChatGPT
That's really cool.
to help you do that.
And then the other thing is
And the other thing is,
being able to adjust
yeah,
your own speaking
yeah,
to be understood.
yes,
Yeah.
that's huge too.
Which is also super important.
Yeah, it's like meeting in the middle,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Communication is about,
It's a two-way street.
yeah, exactly.
And so the source material emphasizes,
Yes,
don't be afraid to make mistakes.
of course.
Like this is your
This is your safe space.
judgment-free zone
Yeah,
to practice.
experiment.
Yeah, try out those weird words.
Yeah.
You're not sure if you're pronouncing right.
And if you make a mistake, who cares?
Who cares?
It's not a big deal.
It's not a big deal.
Yeah,
ChatGPT is not going to judge you.
exactly. And the more you do it,
Right.
the more confident you'll become.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
What are these unconventional ways
Yes, let's get weird.
to use ChatGPT to practice English?
Let's go.
Because the experts
Yeah.
had some really creative ideas here
Okay.
that I think are going to blow your mind.
Okay, I'm right.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
They said, tap into your theatrical side.
Okay.
Use ChatGPT to co-write skits
Oh.
or even like radio plays
Oh, wow.
in
Yeah.
English.
Okay.
So you could
Yeah.
say like,
That's so fun.
hey, ChatGPT, let's write a really funny scene
Okay.
between two friends at a coffee shop
That's really
who
cool.
keep misunderstanding each other.
I love that idea.
Or like,
That's so creative.
let's write a really suspenseful scene
Okay.
for a detective drama
Ooh.
where they're trying to solve a mystery
I like it.
and you're using your English
And you're learning.
to do this.
Uh,
And then imagine taking it a step further
Okay.
and actually performing it.
Oh, wow.
You could record it.
Oh, that's so fun. And you could, because then you could even try out different voices.
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing.
You could do different voices for each character.
I love it.
Talk about practicing your pronunciation.
Yeah, and it's fun, right?
And it's fun,
It doesn't feel like a chore.
which is what they were saying is so
Yeah.
important.
It's like tricking your brain into learning.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like sneaking in the vegetables.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
And speaking of fun,
Okay.
they said turn language practice
Yeah.
into a game night
Ooh.
with ChatGPT.
Okay, how do you do that?
Okay, so think like
Okay.
classic games,
Okay.
but with a language learning twist.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So you could play like 20 questions
Okay.
or I Spy.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
You
But
have to describe things in
you
English.
do it all in English.
Oh, that's fun.
And ChatGPT
That's really cool.
has
Yeah.
this huge database of information.
Yeah, it knows everything.
So it can come up with
Yeah.
some pretty crazy clues.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so you can be like, that's so fun.
I spy with my little eye something blue.
Yeah, and then ChatGPT has to ask you questions
in English.
in English
Oh, that's such a good idea.
to try to figure out what it is.
That's really cool.
And it's just like
I like that
a
one.
fun way to practice.
Because you're learning,
Yeah.
but you're also...
And you don't even realize you're practicing because you're just like,
Exactly.
this is a game.
It's like tricking your brain into learning.
It's tricking your brain into learning.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of which,
Okay.
this next one
Yeah.
really resonated with me.
Okay.
They called it vocabulary building expeditions.
Ooh, vocabulary building expedition.
Yeah.
What is that?
So imagine, like, you're really into astronomy.
Okay.
You could tell ChatGPT,
Uh-huh.
let's go on a vocabulary building expedition
Okay.
to explore the cosmos.
I like it. And it'll
So it's going to give you like a bunch of space words.
yeah, it'll give you like a curated list of
Yeah.
key astronomy terms
Okay.
that you might encounter if you're like
Right.
reading an article about astronomy or
Right, that you might not know.
watching a documentary.
But it's not just like a dry vocabulary list.
Oh,
It's like
huh?
it weaves them into like a little narrative,
Oh.
or it'll give you
Oh, okay.
examples of how to use them in a sentence.
Okay, so it makes it fun.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Like you're actually learning,
yeah,
you're learning these words
Yeah.
naturally as you're like
Right.
exploring this new world.
I like that. Yeah.
And then
Because that's how we learn best, right?
Yeah.
When we don't realize we're learning.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then the cool part is
Okay.
you can have conversations with ChatGPT using those words.
Oh,
So you're like actively putting them into practice.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's not just like memorizing a definition.
Right.
You're actually
You're actually using it.
using it.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
And it just goes to show
It's
that
all about like active learning, right?
yeah, it's all about like
Yeah,
not just
Not just like reading something
passively absorbing information,
and then forgetting it.
but like actually doing something with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's the difference between
Right.
reading a cookbook
Yes.
and then actually like
Getting in the kitchen.
getting your hands dirty and baking the cake.
Yeah, you got to do it.
Yeah.
Got to get your hands dirty.
And that's what I think is so cool about
Yeah.
this whole approach to language learning.
Yeah.
Is that it makes it
It's fun.
fun.
Yeah.
It makes it engaging.
It's like an adventure.
It makes you actually want to practice
Yeah, exactly.
instead of it feeling like a chore.
Instead of it feeling like, ooh,
I got to study now.
Right.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is kind of fun.
Like I'm actually kind of enjoying this.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love it.
So to kind of wrap things up,
Okay.
we've explored all these different ways
Yeah.
that you can use ChatGPT
all these cool tools.
to help you practice English.
Yeah.
And it's everything from those really basic conversations
Right.
to like role-playing specific scenarios
Yeah.
to even like co-writing skits.
Which is amazing.
It's really cool.
You never would have thought of that.
And then you have those vocabulary building expeditions.
Yeah, these are fun.
It's like the possibilities are kind of endless.
Yeah. And as it keeps evolving,
Right.
who knows what they'll come up with.
Exactly. It's like this is just the beginning.
Yeah. That's exciting.
It's really exciting.
It's like we're living in the future.
We are. We're living in the future.
That's crazy.
So if you have been looking for a way
Yeah.
to make English practice
Yeah.
more engaging,
For fun.
more effective,
Yeah.
I think this deep dive
Let's
is
yell
giving
it.
you plenty of ideas to get started.
Yeah, for sure.
So until next time,
Until next time.
happy practicing. All right, ready to dive into this 30-day plan for English fluency. They say it feels more like a game than actual studying.
Yeah, it's amazing how fun it can be. What's interesting is how this plan really breaks everything down step by step.
So no more excuses for putting it off, right?
Yeah.
Let's jump right in. The first 5 days are about building that foundation. And I gotta say, starting with listening, that's not what I expected.
Makes you think, right? It's like how we all learned our first language. We listened to the world around us, the rhythm, the tones, everything way before we even tried to speak.
So it's all about immersion, like we're eavesdropping our way to fluency, basically.
Exactly. And all those sounds you're taking in, they become the building blocks for everything else. Pretty cool, huh?
Dr. Clark, our ESL expert, she suggests kicking off day 1 with podcasts or maybe a TED Talk, something engaging. 15 minutes, just focusing on the big picture, not getting lost in every single word.
There's a good point. It's about training your ear to the language, not memorizing a dictionary in one go. And here's a tip: jot down maybe 5 new words that catch your attention. Then, try using those words naturally throughout your day.
So we're actively using the language right from the get-go. I like it. Day 2, YouTube, right. 10 minutes, but there's a catch.
Oh yeah, this is where things get fun. Find a video you enjoy, something short with clear pronunciation. Pause it, replay it, try your best to match the speaker's intonation, the rhythm, everything. Think of it like an acting class for your English.
I've heard that mimicking can be incredibly helpful, especially with tricky sounds. I knew this guy. He perfected his Spanish by, get this, imitating lines from those telenovelas. Speaking of fun, day 3 brings in music. But we're not just chilling and enjoying the tunes, are we?
Not exactly. This is active listening, remember. Pick a song you like, something catchy, and as you listen, try writing down the lyrics.
You'd be surprised how much you can actually pick up just by doing that.
Right, the combo of music and language, it just makes those words and phrases stick, plus it's fun.
Music has a way of getting stuck in our heads, that's for sure. Okay, day 4, we're keeping the entertainment going. Movie night, or at least like 20 minutes of one. Subtitles on this time. What's the strategy?
This is all about observing. Watch how native speakers naturally use the language, the phrases, the idioms, all of it. Don't stress about understanding every single word. Just let it wash over you.
It's crazy how much we absorb just by immersing ourselves like that.
It really is.
All right, day 5. This is where things get really interesting. Instead of us telling you what to listen to, it's your choice.
It is. Day 5 is all about you. Ditch the textbooks. Dive into a topic you genuinely find interesting. Could be a news article, a podcast, whatever speaks to you. The key here, engagement. Your brain's way more receptive when you're actually enjoying what you're listening to.
It's hiding vegetables in a smoothie, right? You're still getting all the goodness. So we're not just listening passively, we're thinking about the info,
Yeah.
summarizing it, maybe even using those new words in conversation. That's how it really sticks it.
You got it. And with that, we're at the end of week 1. You've primed your ears, dipped your toes into active listening, even started using new words. But the real fun, that begins when you find your voice, which is exactly what we'll explore next time. Welcome back. You spent the last few days really tuning your ear to English, and now it's time to unleash your inner speaker.
Days 6 through 10, we're finding our voice, and from the looks of it, this plan's got some fun ways to get us there.
It does, and don't worry, it eases you into it. Nothing too intimidating, especially at first.
Okay, day 6, 5 minutes, talk to yourself. Now, before people start questioning our sanity, tell us what's the method behind this.
I know it sounds strange, but think of it like a warm-up. You're getting comfortable with the act of speaking, even if it's just to your reflection. No pressure, just let the words flow.
It's like practicing a presentation in the shower, right? You're just getting used to the sound of your own voice, but in English.
Exactly. No one's judging your grammar in the shower. Day 7, though, now we're diving into conversations.
Okay, so it's time to put those listening skills to the test. Time for some real-time interaction. Do you recommend finding a language partner? Maybe someone else learning English? Or are there other options?
All great options. Finding a language partner is fantastic, but there are also tons of language exchange apps these days.
True, true. Lots of online communities dedicated to language learning, too.
You've got so many choices. Technology makes it easy to connect with native speakers for practice. Some apps even use AI now, those chatbots. They can be surprisingly realistic.
Wow, it's like having a pocket-sized English tutor. Okay, day 8, more self-reflection, and I mean that literally this time. We're hitting record and talking for 5 minutes about anything that comes to mind. Are we channeling our inner YouTubers here?
You could say that, but instead of worrying about views and subscribers, this is about becoming your own best critic. You listen back, pay attention to your pronunciation, your fluency. It's like holding up a mirror to your progress.
That's a great way to put it. We often cringe at the sound of our own voices, but it's one of the best tools for improvement.
Totally agree. Okay, day 9, things get a little more interesting. This is where we get into shadowing.
All right, break it down for us. What's the game plan here?
So shadowing, it's all about fine-tuning your pronunciation and rhythm. Pick a short audio or video, maybe a minute or two of a podcast, something you enjoy. Listen closely and try to mimic the speaker as precisely as you can.
So you're matching their intonation, their pauses, everything. Like you're trying to sync your voice with theirs.
Exactly. You're basically becoming a vocal chameleon, blending in with the sounds of native English.
I love that analogy. Okay, day 10, the grand finale of this speaking focus section, we're getting our storytelling on.
Love this one. Storytelling's such a great way to bring all these skills together. Pick a funny anecdote, a memorable experience, just something you can talk about for a bit.
And the key here is to just keep talking, right? Don't worry about making mistakes.
Right. This is about fluency, not perfection. Embrace those little stumbles. They're all part of the process.
So we've made it through the first 10 days. We've trained our ears, found our voices, but our English adventure isn't over yet.
Not even close. Days 11 through 15, we're adding another layer, diving into the world of reading. This is where you build up your vocabulary, really start to understand the structure of English.
Time to crack open those books. But it's not just about classic literature, right?
Definitely not. We're talking articles, short stories, news pieces, blog posts, anything that grabs your interest. And the key here is to read actively, not passively.
Day 11, what's on the reading list?
Find a short English article, something that piques your curiosity. But as you read, don't just let the words wash over you. Highlight 5 words or phrases that are new, really understand their meaning, then try using them in your own sentences. Make them yours.
That's how you really make those new words stick, by actively using them. Day 12, time to get lost in a story.
Exactly. Choose a short story, maybe a chapter from a book. Try to really understand what you're reading. Underline interesting phrases, jot down questions. Then, the real challenge. Summarize the story out loud. You can even record yourself if you're feeling brave.
Oh, I like that. Okay, day 13, this one sounds right up my alley. It's all about exploring your passions in English, of course.
Exactly. Find something you're truly interested in, an article, a research paper, anything. The more you enjoy it, the more engaged your brain will be.
Learning is always easier when you're having fun, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Day 14, time to focus on dialogue. Why is that so important?
Because dialogue is everywhere in real life. For day 14, immerse yourself in something with lots of conversations, a play, a movie script, even a comic book. See how people really talk?
Oh, I'm a sucker for a good dramatic reading. And day 15, we're revisiting our reading list, right? Taking a trip down memory lane.
Exactly. This is where you solidify all that new vocab. Go back to what you read earlier in the week and try retelling the information in your own words.
Repetition. Repetition. It's amazing how much we can learn just by reading, isn't it? But there's still more to this 30-day challenge. What's coming up next?
Next, we move from consuming language to creating it. Get ready to put pen to paper because we're about to explore the world of writing in English.
We're back and ready to tackle the final stretch of our 30-day English challenge. We've already covered listening, speaking, reading, and now the grand finale, writing.
This is where it all comes together. When you start writing, you really solidify your grasp of English grammar, sentence structure. Plus, you get to express yourself creatively, which is always fun.
Time to channel our inner Shakespeare. So, day 16, where do we begin?
We're starting with a classic journaling. Just jot down some thoughts about your day. Aim for around 100 words, but don't get too caught up on the word count.
It's all about getting those thoughts flowing, right?
Exactly. And try to use some descriptive language, maybe practice those past tense verbs. It'll come in handy.
I remember when I started keeping a journal in English, it really felt like a workout for my brain, but in a good way. Okay, day 17, what's on the writing menu today?
How about a review? Pick something you've experienced lately, a movie, a restaurant, anything really, and write a short review about it.
Now that's something I can get behind.
Oh,
I love writing reviews. Though, hopefully my English has improved since my early attempts. Those were probably a sight to behold.
I'm sure they were entertaining, at the very least. Day 18, we're tackling something a bit more practical, but oh so important, email writing.
Oh, emails? Can't live with them, can't live without them, right?
It's true, but think about it. Emails are how we communicate so often these days, with colleagues, friends, even potential employers. Being able to write a clear, effective email in English, that's a valuable skill.
So we're talking formal business emails here or more casual, friendly ones?
That's the beauty of it. You get to choose. Imagine you're writing to a friend, telling them all about this 30-day English challenge. How would you describe it? What kind of language would you use?
Now that's a great writing prompt. It's taking something we're already familiar with and putting it into practice. I like it. Day 19, it's time to put on our thinking caps. We're writing opinion pieces.
That's right. Think of a topic you're passionate about. Could be anything, really the benefits of learning a new language, your favorite type of music, anything. Then write a short opinion piece about it.
It's all about expressing yourself, finding your voice, even if it's just on paper. Okay, day 20, the final day of our writing journey. What's the plan?
Today is about reflection. Take some time to think about your writing progress. What have you learned? What's been challenging? Where do you want to go from here?
A little introspection never hurt anyone. Now, we've spent 5 days each on listening, speaking, reading, and writing. But what about those last 5 days of the challenge?
This is where the real magic happens. Days 21 through 25, it's all about integration. You've been practicing these skills individually, and now it's time to weave them all together.
So it's like we've learned the individual dance steps, and now it's time to hit the dance floor in freestyle.
Exactly. The goal is to use English organically in real-world situations. So instead of giving you specific tasks, we're encouraging you to find opportunities to use your English every day.
I love that. It's about taking ownership of our learning. But what about those moments when we stumble? Those times when we forget a grammar rule or get tongue-tied in a conversation? What do we do then?
Ah, yes, the dreaded fear of making mistakes. It's something every language learner experiences, believe me. But here's the thing, mistakes are not failures. They're simply part of the learning process.
It's like they say we learn more from our mistakes than our successes.
Exactly. Instead of beating yourself up over every little error, try to view them as valuable feedback. Each mistake is a chance to learn and improve.
Turning those linguistic lemons into lemonade. Okay, so instead of dwelling on those slip-ups, we should analyze them, figure out what went wrong, and then move on.
Precisely. And remember, learning a language is a journey. There's no finish line. So be kind to yourself, celebrate those small victories, and enjoy the ride.
Well said. Now, for everyone listening, I want you to close your eyes and imagine yourself on day 30. You've spent a month immersing yourself in English, pushing your boundaries, embracing those inevitable mistakes. How does it feel to order your coffee with ease, to chat with a colleague, to navigate a new city using your new language skills? That feeling, that sense of accomplishment, of possibility, that's the true magic of language learning. And remember, the journey doesn't end on day 30. Keep exploring, keep experimenting, keep playing with the language. Until next time, happy learning.
All right, so you're ready to really get a handle on speaking English, huh? Like you're aiming for that next level fluency and you've got 30 minutes a day to dedicate to it. Well, you are in the right place. We took a deep dive into a podcast with Dr. Emily Clark and what was his name again? John.
John Parker.
John Parker, that's it. Both of them, by the way, are total gurus in the language learning world, and they dropped some seriously cool techniques.
And it wasn't all just, theoretical stuff. They offered really concrete steps, stuff you can, actually use right away.
Oh, absolutely. Like that first tip, just chatting with yourself in English for 5 minutes a day. I'll be honest, at first I thought, okay, is this for real? But when they explained the reasoning, it really clicked. So why does that work again?
You know how sometimes you get stuck translating everything in your head? It's like there's this extra layer slowing you down. Well, talking to yourself in English, it forces your brain to think directly in the language.
Makes sense. So it's kind of like rewiring those neural pathways, right?
Yeah.
The more you use them, the stronger they get.
Exactly. They even gave the example of just narrating your morning routine. Like,
So-
okay, I'm grabbing my coffee, keys, let's go. Basic stuff, but you're basically training your brain to operate in English.
And it's okay to have like a cheat sheet handy, right? Especially when you're just starting out.
Absolutely. Think of it as your safety net. As you get more comfortable, you can ditch the cheat sheet and start getting more creative with it. And speaking of creative, their next tip was all about role-playing, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I was curious about that one too. How does pretending you're ordering a coffee actually translate to real life situations?
Because it takes the pressure off. Think about it. How often are you in situations where you need to use English? Ordering food, asking for directions, even just making small talk. Role-playing lets you practice those scenarios without the fear of messing up. It's like a safe space to practice.
So it's like a dress rehearsal for real life.
Exactly. They had this great example about ordering coffee. It wasn't just a simple, coffee, please. It was more like, could I get a large latte with oat milk? And what would you recommend for someone who likes, a really strong brew? They were paying attention to the nuances of a real conversation.
And that's important because in real life, you can't just hit rewind if you mess up.
Nope. Conversations are dynamic. They even suggested checking out apps like ELSA Speak and Hello Talk. They simulate these kinds of situations or connect you with other learners. Kind of cool when you think about it.
Yeah, so you're practicing your English and maybe making some new friends along the way. Win-win for sure. Okay, they also briefly touched on something called shadowing, which, to be honest, sounded a tad intimidating at first. What is that exactly?
Oh, it's not intimidating at all. Actually, it's kind of fun. Imagine you're listening to your favorite English speaker, maybe on a podcast or a TED Talk. Shadowing basically means trying to talk along with them. You try to match their pronunciation, their intonation, even their pace. It's like you're their shadow voice.
So it's not just about repeating words. It's about capturing the music of the language the way it flows naturally. Did they have any suggestions for how to do it effectively? I mean, where do you even start?
They did, actually. They're big fans of TED Talks, mainly because they come with subtitles. So you can listen and read along at the same time.
Right.
They recommended starting small, like with a 1 or 2 minute clip. Really zero in on the details, how they pronounce certain words, the pauses, that kind of thing.
It's almost like you're dissecting the language, right? Like really getting under the hood of it.
Exactly. And as you get comfortable, you can gradually increase the length of the clips. It's like anything, the more you practice, the easier it gets.
Makes total sense. Now, one thing that really stood out to me was their emphasis on active listening. It's not enough to just passively listen to something in English, is it?
Nope. I mean, passive listening is fine, don't get me wrong, but if you're serious about improving your speaking skills, you got to step it up a notch. The podcast hosts suggested turning listening into a conversation.
Interesting. How do you do that exactly?
Well, you could listen to, say, a news segment on the BBC or NPR, and then pause it and, summarize what you just heard. You could even record yourself doing it if you're feeling ambitious.
So it's like you're talking to a friend, sharing something interesting. I like it.
Yeah, and it makes you think critically about what you're hearing, to put it into your own words, which, by the way, also helps strengthen those neural connections.
Double whammy. They also mentioned Duolingo stories, which I've heard good things about. What's the verdict on those?
Oh, they're great. It's all about the interactive element. Remember those choose-your-own-adventure books we used to read as kids?
Oh, yeah, I loved those.
It's kind of like that, but for language learning. You're listening to a story, and then bam, you get to make decisions that change how the story unfolds. It keeps you engaged, makes you want to see what happens next.
And it's not just one monotonous voice, right?
Right. They have a variety of accents and speaking styles, which is great for getting exposure to different ways English is spoken around the world.
Okay, last but not least, we've got storytelling. I've always found that a fun way to wrap things up.
Me too. And you don't have to be like the next Hemingway or anything. It's more about finding your voice, getting comfortable expressing yourself.
So what's a good way to incorporate that into this 30-minute routine?
Well, they had this really simple suggestion. Just take a few minutes at the end of each day to recount something interesting that happened. It could be as simple as, oh, I went to the store today and they were out of my favorite cereal. Can you believe it?
It sounds almost too easy.
I know, right? But it works. It helps you get comfortable talking about your day-to-day life in English.
It's all about building those conversational muscles, right?
Exactly. And if you're ever drawing a blank, there's a website called Conversation Starters World.
What is that?
It's full of interesting questions and prompts to get your creative juices flowing.
Okay, so instead of just thinking about what I'm having for dinner tonight, I could be pondering the meaning of life. All in English, of course.
Precisely. The key is to make language learning a part of your life. Not just something you check off your to-do list.
I love that. It's funny, right? Like, we make language learning this big, scary thing in our minds.
Yeah, totally.
But really, it's just about breaking it down into bite-sized pieces.
Exactly. Instead of thinking, I don't have time,
Yeah.
it's more like, okay, I could do 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there,
Mm-hmm.
and it all adds up.
For sure. And the best part is you can fit it into your life. Like, listen to a podcast on your commute. Practice shadowing while you cook dinner.
Oh, I like that.
Turn your daily walk into a storytelling session.
It's like a game.
Exactly. And you know that feeling when you finally master something you thought was impossible?
The best feeling.
That's what language learning is like, too. That aha moment, where you can just express yourself naturally in another language.
Oh, yeah.
It's incredibly rewarding.
It is. It's like you've unlocked this whole new side of yourself, this new way to connect with the world.
Yes. Connect with people from different cultures, experience new things.
Travel to new places with confidence.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe these new skills could open doors you never even imagined.
Absolutely. The best part is it's your journey, You set the pace, you find what works for you, and you celebrate those victories along the way.
I love that. So, to recap, we've covered 5 awesome techniques for leveling up your English-speaking skills, all in just 30 minutes a day.
Yeah, 30 minutes, that's all it takes.
We started with talking to yourself, which I have to admit sounded a little strange at first.
Yeah. Okay.
But it makes so much sense.
It really does.
Then we moved on to role-playing, which is great for practicing those real-life situations.
Absolutely. Getting comfortable with those everyday conversations.
And who could forget shadowing? Mimicking those awesome English speakers we admire.
Right. Tuning into the rhythm and the flow of the language.
And of course, active listening and storytelling, which, let's be honest, are just fun ways to learn.
Totally. They make you feel like you're actually using the language, not just studying it.
Exactly. So there you have it, folks. Another deep dive in the books. Hopefully you're feeling inspired and ready to put these tips into action.
Remember, the most important thing is to just start. Don't overthink it. Just dive in and have fun with it.
That's right. And hey, we're here to support you every step of the way. We'll catch you on our next deep dive with even more tips and tricks. Until then, happy learning. Ever feel like you're missing out on